If you have pain in the tensor fascia lata, you may have tried a lot of massage and stretching to fix your TFL, but you probably have not done exercises to strengthen the tensor fascia lata, and that can lead to chronic pain that gets super frustrating. So in this video, I'm going to explain how you can determine whether you need to strengthen your TFL, and I'm going to show you exercises for your tensor fascia lata so that you can get rid of that pain and so you get full range of motion and function of your hip again. So if you're ready, let's get ready to think right, move right, and feel right. So first, let's talk about some of the signs that your TFL may be weak. Number one is when you are standing, you find it really difficult to keep your kneecaps pointing straight forward. Instead, your kneecaps are pointing out to the side, and when you try to correct that, you just feel super awkward. It can feel tight around your hips, and nothing feels good here. And when you're walking, your feet are probably pointing out like this. You might have this side-to-side waddle going on, and if you tried to correct to bring your feet and your kneecaps to point straight forward, you just might find it super duper awkward. And while we're talking about awkward stuff, what brought you to this video? Why are you thinking about your TFL? Drop me a comment down below. The tensor fascia lata attaches to the front/side of your pelvis and then down to the front/side of your femur. So that helps create hip internal rotation. But a lot of times we are sitting around in chairs all day, just kind of letting our knees splay out like this, and then the TFL is not really doing much work, and it's kind of staying in this weak, shortened position, not really doing much at all. So when we go to actually use it, we get cramping, or we just feel totally feeble in the motions that the TFL is supposed to be helping us perform. Now let's jump into the exercises for your tensor fascia lata. So you're going to be sitting on the side of a bench, a couch, chair, whatever. You're just going to put your leg out to the side so it's hanging off of the edge, and then you're going to lean over and you're going to lift the foot and ankle up towards the sky or the ceiling. Just hold that position and then slowly back down. The longer you hold it, the harder this is going to be. You're going to feel cramping in the muscles on the side of your hip. That's going to be your TFL. It's going to be your glute min, a little bit of glute medius as well. So you're holding that position and then slowly back down. A big common problem for people is they'll compensate by throwing their back into it and will just arch. I don't want that. So make sure you have full control. You're keeping the spine relatively neutral the whole time, and you're using the muscles here on the side of the hip. If you can't feel the right muscles, I encourage you to hold the position until you do. If you start to feel the wrong thing, then you know you've been executing incorrectly. So relax, reset. Maybe don't lift the leg as high or the foot as high, and then hold that position until you feel the right stuff kicking in. Another option, and also a way to progress this, is to put a light weight on the ankle. So don't start off with 5 or 10 pounds, start off with like 1 pound, 2 pounds. Especially if you can't feel the right muscle, you start with a lighter weight, just enough to create a little extra challenge, and then you start to feel the right stuff. You don't want to throw on so much that you have to cheat and compensate. So just a little bit, hold it, feel the right muscles, fire, and then you can start to do more repetitions, right? If you had no trouble feeling the right muscles, then adding the weight obviously will really amp up the difficulty level for the muscles and help you build more strength in the TFL. You can also change your body position to be more upright or more leaning over to the side. That's all fine. What's going to be changing is as your pelvis position changes, you're going to be in relatively more abduction versus adduction. So when you're more in adduction, that's more similar to when you're standing. Think about what's going on with the pelvis, right? Femur, pelvis, it's around a 90-degree-ish angle, okay? But then when I'm here, is it the same? Yeah, actually, I get that same-ish or even a little more acute angle here. Or if I sit up, then it's like that leg is way out to the side. It's like I'm kind of trying to do the half splits by being more upright. All of these angles are totally fine to play with. I encourage you to mess around and see what's more challenging for you so that you build strength in these hip muscles in all these different angles. Remember that you want volition at every position. Another way to put that is you want strength at every length. So remember, you also want to be working on both sides and make sure you figure out which side is weaker and needs more attention. I know for me, my left side is much worse at hip internal rotation in general. So it's very important for me to work on it regularly and more often than I do the right side. If you have the similar pattern, which is very common, then you're probably going to want to do extra reps or a full extra set for your weaker side and make sure that you're building more strength and control in this side. Also, think about getting that foot up as high as you can without compensating with your spine. So if you first start and you find like, wow, I can barely lift this foot up, my God, that's fine. Hold it there. Get used to controlling that end position and see if you can just squeak out another couple degrees of motion. And every day, every week that you're working on this, make sure you try to squeeze out a little extra. And one more note about the low back and the pelvis. You will find that you have a tendency to try to roll and use your spinal muscles to accomplish a fake version of the exercise. Make sure that you hold that end position and then see what happens when you posteriorly tilt and anteriorly tilt. So this is helpful to highlight any place that you are compensating. It's also helpful to gain control and the ability to have the pelvis in anterior or posterior tilt or neutral while still firing the TFL and the other ancillary muscles there. That'll give you more control and it'll just give you a better sense of hip mobility and hip stability so that you have better balance when you're doing things like throwing kicks or running around and pivoting. And finally, you don't have to limit yourself to having the leg in line with your body here in hip extension. You can also have it more in front of you so that you're in hip flexion and then work on hip internal rotation. So you could be working on it like this. You could be leaned over a little bit to give yourself a little more leverage so you can start to feel the right stuff and then gradually start bringing yourself to a more upright position so that the TFL is working in that really short position. But again, if you first start and you just feel like, whoa, this is super tough, then it's okay. Just work in that tough position and gradually bring yourself up. You can even be leaned over, start working on that. It's going to get harder and harder the more you're leaned in there, but enjoy it because that's going to be a useful thing for you when you want to do any kind of motion where your hip starts getting into hip internal rotation and you feel like you're going to go surfing and you need to bend that in, or if you're a hockey goalie and you need to be able to bring your leg down, it's really important to have this kind of strength in the hip muscles. Hey, I want to give a huge shout out to Joyce and Edward. Thank you guys both so much. Both Joyce and Edward went to uprighthealth.com/donate and donated $50 each to help support this channel. Thank you guys so much. If you want to support me too, you can go to uprighthealth.com/donate and make a donation, or you can find me on Patreon, send me money via PayPal, or join me here on YouTube. No matter what, I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. And I highly encourage you to get on my newsletter at uprighthealth.com/newsletter so we always stay connected just in case YouTube decides to really commit to becoming another TikTok and I just decide to quit YouTube altogether. So let's stay connected, uprighthealth.com/newsletter. Now let's get back to the video. Before we get into the second exercise, I want to make sure you understand a key concept here. The reason we're strengthening the TFL is because massage and stretching alone will never restore full function of a muscle, because muscles only get stronger, they only maintain function when you're actually using them and training them. Otherwise they atrophy, and atrophy aches. So if your TFL constantly feels tight and you've been stretching, you've been massaging, and your tensor fascia lata is still saying, help me, then you know that the muscle is actually weak and it needs to be trained so that you can feel better for the long run. Another good option for strengthening your hip internal rotators like your TFL is to use a cable machine or some long elastic bands to help you by putting the band or the cable right around your foot or your ankle. And then you can see here that I'm just in this half kneeling position and I'm going to let the band win a little bit and then I'm going to pull using these hip internal rotators like the TFL. So you can play around with your position to kind of figure out how you're going to get maximum resistance and you're going to feel the right muscles firing. You can be upright like this. You could be upright with more hip abduction, meaning this line coming out to the side here. and work on that hip internal rotation. You can also be in more hip adduction and work on that. Just make sure you're not feeling pain because you're overstretching or just because something is so weak that it starts yanking on your kneecap. Stay in positions that are not painful, but feel the right muscles work while you're there. You can also be down on all fours, which means your hips are going to be in flexion, and then you can do the same exercise. So it's very similar to how we were sitting on the box or bench and trying to get hip internal rotation, but this way you can really focus the resistance properly, and you know that you can maintain hip flexion without cheating or leaning or anything like that. So this is a great option if you have long training bands or if you have a cable machine at the gym. I do recommend getting some sort of a training band or use a fatter band around a thinner band, because if you use just one of these training bands, sometimes it'll dig into your skin and that just doesn't feel good. It's really distracting for the execution of your TFL exercise. So let's talk about how often to be doing these exercises. If you're just starting out, waking up these long dormant muscles, you're going to want to take it easy when you first start. So go on like Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Saturday. The reason being is there's a high chance you're going to cripple yourself with soreness when you start using muscles that you haven't used in a very long time. So do it today, 2 sets for each side, and then do an extra set for the weaker side and wait a couple days before you do it again. If you notice, I feel fine, it was tired, but it feels good, great. Then you might be able to bump it up to 3 times a week, and that would be a good pace for you. If you notice, hey, when I sit at the computer and I'm just like tippity-tap typing away, my hips feel worse, but I do these exercises and I feel better, you might discover that it's beneficial for you to be doing these exercises every day. Maybe it's even multiple times a day, but just at a reduced intensity, and maybe a couple times a week. You do it with ankle weights or resistance with a cable machine or bands, and really try to crank up the strength of those muscles. Once you've built enough strength in your tensor fascia lata, you might decide that you don't really need to do these exercises that often, but maybe once or twice a week with higher resistance is enough to keep things feeling good. There are other exercises that you can do that are more advanced. You could be holding onto something and balancing and trying to bring your leg up into internal rotation and then going through this nice full range of motion. But if you're just starting out, that's a lot of things to manage, and you're limited by how much control you have over your pelvis, and that's just going to not be so easy if you're in free floating space. If you're sitting down or you are down on the floor in that half kneeling position that I've shown you, you'll have better control and better focus to target the muscles that you're looking to hit. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go into these types of exercises in the future. It just means that when you first start, it might be a little bit beyond your abilities because there's a lot of variables to manage without falling over. You might also be wondering if you should continue doing stretching and massage work. If you find it beneficial, go ahead, keep doing it. There's nothing wrong with stretching and massage work. It's actually quite good for you, and there are uses for it. You just don't want to get caught in the trap of thinking that stretching alone is going to fix everything. You need to make sure your muscles are strong in different positions, so make sure that you strengthen the tensor fascia lata by using exercises like these. I also strongly recommend you work on your strength and length of all the muscles around your hip joints. Your tensor fascia lata can be really cranky because everything is out of whack, so don't neglect the hip flexors, the inner thigh muscles, the glutes, all the things, because they all affect your comfort levels in your hips. If you're looking for a program that'll help you rebuild your hips at home, go to uprighthealth.com/DIY and find a program that'll work for you. Of course, I also have tons of free resources that I'll link to at the end of this video and also in the description box, so be sure to check out all those free resources for your hips. So to wrap things up, remember that atrophy in your tensor fascia lata can lead to pain in your tensor fascia lata, and exercises to strengthen the TFL are going to help you big time. Do these exercises enough to feel the right muscles working and getting stronger, but don't overdo it so much that you feel like you can't walk the next day. For more free videos to help you with your hips, check these out here and check the description box. To support this channel, use the links you'll find in the description box, or use the join and thanks buttons on YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe with the bell notification on. And as always, I hope you remember that pain sucks. Life shouldn't.